Howdy, and we're back for another tier list video. Today we're going to talk about the Obelisk. It's been a minute since we updated the Obelisk. I'm going to do my best to update our tier list as frequently as possible because I hate when I do put out the tier list and we get a patch right after I make a new tier list and we have to adjust everything. But for the Obelisk, hopefully this won't be a 45-minute video. We're going to start right at the bottom in the C, move our way on up just like everything else. I do want to tell you guys that we do rate the tier list based on the utility of the heroes and not just damage, because any hero can do damage. So we're going to go to the bottom and tell you the C tier is the ones that just doesn't provide enough that's good for the Obelisk. Really being able to sustain and getting passive damage through sap is the main objective through Obelisk. It makes it faster, makes it easier. Generally the floors before the below 20 are relatively easier. It doesn't take as much. You can go through with pretty much pure damage, but once you get above 20, that's when it gets harder because the HP gets scales higher and the enemy's damage scales higher as well. Alright, I personally feel like that I could possibly move up the Green Mah-Lon into the B tier. The only reason is because she's a turn bar booster, but she only gives you 10%. 10% is not a lot. It's okay, but still not the greatest. The red Johan, he's selfish. So it's like he can work really well for himself, but you're going to need more utility for your team and not just heroes being complete selfish. So he just doesn't make the cut because once you get into those higher stages, he falls off in his capabilities. The Dark Helga just does nothing. Like she's primarily a PvP unit. You could use her like as a farmer, but she doesn't really have like super high damage multipliers. It's decent from what I have seen her do, but it's just so many other heroes that kind of just outclass her. The only thing she got going for us is she's a element neutral hero, and that's pretty much it. After the earlier stages, she's not going to provide much for you. Now let's move on to the B tier. And while we're at it, let's increase the size of our screen because I know it's small and many of you won't be able to see exactly what's going on here. Alright, here in the B tier, we will start with the Green Lyra. She's one of those selfish heroes. She doesn't quite do much other than provide damage, and just like regular damage is not going to cut it as much during the later stages. And she's single target, I believe. I think her burst might be AoE or something like that too, but she just doesn't do enough and not the best hero to bring it to the Obelisk. The Red Rosanna, she may be a little bit better because her shield on S2. Shields are going to be great, but I still don't. I don't have any real experience with her, and since she's one of the heroes that only been in the KR, and I didn't pick her up back then, I know how she's used, but I'm not quite sure if she is going to be that great in the Obelisk because she is a striker, and her shield is based on her attack and not her HP. So in the later stages, she probably will fall off heavily. Blue Olivia is pretty good. I think she's better in the raid than she is for Obelisk. She has a bit of self sustain. She can break defense and everything, but I don't think she is quite up to par compared to some of the other heroes. Now, I wouldn't say if you have her and if you're using her that she's bad to bring. She's just not good to bring. Now, the red pup pretty much is just damage, and damage is just not enough. Like after you get into the later stages above 20, he falls off just like most of the other damage dealers. So no, Blue Water, he can do some pretty good damage numbers, but that's all he's going to do is damage. And it seems like we're back into like how the raid tier list was, where we talk about like, yeah, that's all they got is damage, but that's just not enough. And it's even more crucial in the Obelisk because you can use a hero like him or the Red Pup or any other the damage dealers to help clear. It's just going to take a really long time when you're not bringing in sap. Red Aleph, small sustain. really good in the early stages, I would say, just because her S1, if she kills something, she can get another turn. So that could buy you a little bit of time, a little bit of setup. But once you get to the later stages, I mean, she does have true damage if she crits on her burst, but outside of that, that's pretty much non existent. We do got the buffs that's coming up soon for some of the heroes, so they are going to be a little bit better. I still don't think that the Red Astrid is going to be that much better, at least not for this content in particular. Now, the Dark Mikhail, he is getting a buff soon, but he has true damage on his burst, but that's all he's bringing is damage, so no. Same with the Dirty Bird, just nothing but damage, so no. Then we have the Blue Charlotte, which I'm shocked they didn't buff her in the patch. She's okay. She got some real good heals, but it's just better clerics that we have in the game where she just kind of falls off. Doesn't do you any good if she's the only one that's alive in the battle. And maybe a tank or two. Now let's jump over into the A tier. Now I was kind of fighting with myself about Johann. I did have him in the B tier, but the light Johann, I think he deserves A tier. Cause like he does have attack break on S2, but S1, he's the only hero that has a provoke. Well, there are some buffs with some other heroes that has provoke on S1. I believe him being a warrior allows him to be able to counterattack if he gets hit and provide the provoke on. So it's going to be pretty useful if you are using him, if you have him built. He's not necessary, but he's still a stellar unit to use. Now, the red Yashua, giving attack buff and invincibility to probably more likely your main damage dealer if you are using damage dealers is going to be okay. So I think that is great. Plus, he has the chance to reduce turn bars on S1. And if you're using him in the burst, the attack break and defense break for 2 turns will be helpful in battles and especially in real tight situations. So I definitely think he deserves A from there. Then we got the Light Olivia, which none of us on Global have, but she has a lot of utility. I'm not gonna stay on her long and talk about her. Like once we get her, we'd probably revisit it and say something. But Blue Fram is nice. She's probably one of the best heroes in the game for like all content. So yeah, if you do have her, the AoE stuns that she provides is great. If it's not enough, you can always put a shock set on her. You got the bulwark to keep your team tanky because she's a guardian. You can run Aegis on her so she can just still be tanky. You know, Aegis bulwark build or try Aegis, dual Aegis, whatever you have for your gear and everything to make her useful. Plus the death break on too, which is not super strong since sap is the main damage source for the later stages, but in the earlier stages it still will be helpful. In the later stages, if you're not bringing sap or if you still using regular damage included with sap, then yeah, she's going to be real helpful there in that aspect. Then we have the red Mah-Lon who has damage down on S1, which kills the damage of an enemy. That's going to be great, especially once you get to the boss stages. And she has a sap on S2, so she can provide sap that can be a little bit helpful for your team. And she's a sniper. Snipers is going to be real useful, especially on stages where you're forced to use a formation that isn't burst, and if you're forced to use a formation that isn't assist for people that don't have burst formation because you're probably going to more likely run assist in most cases. Blue Pup, he does have the turn bar reduction on S2 that can be real beneficial, and he can possibly strip on S1, so that makes him real useful in that regard. Astrid, just because she has a strip on S2 and then she does have true damage on burst, so she's pretty okay up until you get to that level 20 mark like most heroes that does damage. The green Lumi has a lot of utility with the attack breaks and the speed slows and a lot of the extra bonuses that she has in her kit. I believe she's one of the ones that's also getting a buff as well, which makes her tankier in the battle. And she's a guardian, so that's great. Green Eyes, one of the heroes that we don't have, but attack bar reduction. I'm not going to really stick on him too long. And then the Red Lapis, the same thing. First with crit damage down and crit rate down. We're not going to stay on him because we don't have him yet, but we'll come back to them in another video later when they do hit the global side. Red Lyrae, resistance debuff actually is a lot stronger for the Obelisk because they resist a lot, and if you're not coming with 100+ debuff rate, you're going to be in trouble. So having the resistance down is going to help you land those saps or your death breaks and damage down attack breaks and all the other debuffs that you may be applying, all that good stuff. So yeah, she's gonna be a pretty good option to have. Plus turn bar reduction if you use her in the burst. And she's a warrior, can land a death break on the enemy's turn if she's attacked with if you got the counter set on her. Then we got the green Aleph, which is probably better for the raid, but still could be useful in getting your main damage dealer more turns. I think it falls off a bit unless your sap user has more damage than, or more attack rather, than the other heroes on the team. Other than that, she does provides a bit of shielding and a good user for bulwark. So possibility to bring her in. Like Mah-Lon has a bunch of sustain. She's a sniper, so that's gonna be great for you guys, just like we were saying before. But she has a regen on S2, I believe, and then S1. Long as she crits, she's going to heal the team pretty good, and she's just a overall solid hero to have. The blue Beretta, she's getting a little bit of a buff too, and her heals is going to be even better for the team. It's going to be especially better for the Obelisk, just because once you get into those later stages, you might take a bit of damage. Zyra, Stellar Unit. Her stun is actually going to be good because she can do that on S1. And then she has her AoE attack break and then her death break that she can do on her burst. That's going to be pretty useful. I think she's a decent hero. Then we got the Red Beretta, who also has just like some pretty good buffs that can be useful and can do a bit of damage. Some stages I feel like she's not going to be that useful on. She's a pretty okay hero. I think because of her buffs, she kind of sort of deserves A tier, but she's more like that in between B and A. She's more useful in terms of utility than the heroes in B, but she doesn't have the best utility, but she does provide damage as well. So she's kind of in that in between marker, but she's pretty solid. All right, so let's go over to the S tier where a lot of things are happening. So we got quite a few heroes in the S tier. I feel like there is a lot of strength in the S tier. So we're going to start and clump up a bunch of these more stronger heroes together. Now, because these heroes are who they are, because how expensive it is if you were to purchase some of them and just multipliers and skills like that, like the light Olivia, the light Sophie, the green Lapis, and the blue Aleph, all of them got really insane damage in their kit, so they're probably going to be like main damage sources outside of bringing sap, which that's what you're really going to need to kill in the higher stages. So I wanted to clump them all in because they do have some of them do have extra utility and things in their kit, but it's just mostly the amount of damage they can do in comparison to every other hero in the game is what makes them at this level of S tier. Then we got both of the best healers in the game, Green Charlotte and the Blue Vanessa, who's going to sustain and keep your team alive as best as possible. So, of course, if you have them built and you in those tougher stages, more likely you want to use one of these two. Then we can go over here to Arslan, who's strong, always been strong, always will be strong. I mean, you got the attack buff, the turn bar push, the attack break, and the skill, and he can do damage if you need him to. Warrior, so he can counter if you got the gear set for him to land his attack break. Strong hero all around. If you have him and if you bought him because he's no longer available now, guess by all means use him all the way through. Then we have Blue 9 here who provides some sustain for himself and an AoE provoke on his S2 that can be helpful. He is a warrior, so he can keep himself alive really well. He doesn't necessarily need a lot of healing in that case, just some healing because he provides himself with the shield. And if his shield breaks, then yeah, maybe then. But other than that, he's a pretty solid hero. I don't think he's like super best, but he's definitely a good hero if you have him and you have him built. Then we got the Red Fram coming in pretty soon, where she is just going to be nuts, like with all of the provoking that she's going to be able to do. Like she has a lot going for her in her kit. I almost wanted to put her in the broken tier, but I just feel like she's not completely busted all the way, maybe for PvP, but for Obelisk, she definitely pulls her own weight really well with her provoking her action gauge reduction that she has and being able to give herself a counter buff and defense buff for your team all in one kit. She might be broken tier, but right now she's a solid S. Then we have the red Lumi who has a bunch of utility in her kit, and she's a sniper to boot. And snipers are great. She got, attack damage reduction. She can reduce attack gauge, stuns reduction, AoE. Like she has a lot in her kit that can be real useful. You can use her for damage, but you probably want to use her for mostly the utility in her kit. So building her pretty tanky and just letting her kind of do her thing while your damage dealers, get it in. And then we got the green Olivia. Now she's the only hero that can just continuously reduce the action gauge off because it's on her S1. So with the right team set up, she can lock a hero down and keep them from moving. Like when you pair her up with other action gauge reducers. So it makes her really strong. Plus, S2 has the slow debuff, so it could be beneficial in for your team as well and keeping the enemy from taking turns. Red Nessa is going to be decent because her defense buff, plus she has some pretty good heals and invincibility, so you can still kind of run like the Vanessa strats that you do in the story mode and Obelisk as well to just time it so your team doesn't take a lot of damage if you do things correctly. So she's definitely good in that aspect. Then we got Green Pup. Green Pup in the past has been one of the ones that wasn't really that great that you shouldn't build. But if you're not building like the Dark Nine, because you might not want to buy them with the crystals, you just want to like get gear or something, or you haven't gotten the contract for the blue Basilica, the green pup is one that is being slept on because he has two saps, one on his S1 and two saps that he provides on his S2, just like Dark Nine. He is one that you could pick up. Plus, he's a warrior, so that's a possibility of a sap being landed on the enemy's turn if he's attacked. Then we got the red 9 who also provides sap on his S1. Then he can break defenses on S2 and reduce action gauge on his burst, making him really strong to be used. And he's a guardian, so possible bulwark set for your team. Just a lot of work that can be put in if this hero is being used. And we got Rosanna, who's currently no longer available, but many of us have her. She does have AoE provoke on her burst. Um, she can give herself a counterattack buff, but she mostly just pushes your team. So because she's a turn bar booster, so that's like the biggest things with her. You can build her real tanky, provoke some things, and turn bar boost, and you're Gucci. Then we got Helga, who's a pretty solid damage dealer, but she has sap in her kit and sustain in her kit. And that's why she's kind of up here, just because she can provide a bit of sap. She might be a bit of A tier, and because I don't think her saps are as good as like the green pups or anything like that, but she still can provide them. Then we got the blue Lumi who got a slight buff that's coming up, who's already been good for the obelisk, like lots of turn bar reductions, sleep in her kit, so unless you attack the enemy if they're asleep, it's pretty much like a stun, and unless they get hit. That's kind of how that works. So she does provide some good stuff in the obelisk. Then we got the red bird, who has got a major buff given himself on his burst AoE strip, which is going to be better suited for PvP, but can be useful in the obelisk and possibly those boss stages for the bosses that like to, or bosses or some of the minions with the bosses that like to provide buffs. So you're able to remove those buffs when you use him to burst. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. We got Chrome, turn bar boost, regen. We know Chrome. We love Chrome. Moving on. Red Helga, another one that's being slept on pretty heavily. That at some point we should be building for the raid, but she has a lot of utility that works well in the obelisk. Like, she's probably even better in the obelisk than she is in a raid because her S1, she can break attack, her S2 AoE defense break, and then she has an AoE stun on her burst. Like, it really wasn't many heroes that had stuns, and she had an AoE stun, but it didn't really do anything unless you was using her in PvP for the longest, and Obelisk as well. So it's like now she has a place where she can really shine if you were to build her out. And she's a warrior too. Then we got the green Lucy, who we all know and love, who can dish out a lot of damage and a bit of sustain. I think she probably fought off a bit in the later stages, but since she does have her S2 that can kind of scale off of the enemy's max HP, she's going to always do somewhat of decent damage, regardless of how much her other skills damage falls off. And then she doesn't really die if you build her correctly. Last in the S tier, let's talk about the green Sophie. So she has a possibility of a strip on her first skill, which is going to be real strong. AoE attack break on S2, and her burst provides AoE speed down and action day gauge reduction, which is going to be really strong for the obelisk. This is probably the best content for her in particular. Possibly use her in PvP. I feel like Obelisk and PvP heroes are practically the same, but some heroes probably shine more in PvP, so I might shine more in Obelisk. Alright, so the last portion, and I was gonna name rename it from Broken Tier to the Lucy tier, but we just leave it as the Broken Tier for now. But in this tier, these are possibly the best heroes that you can use in your team comp if you have them. Blue Lucy being number one because she is the only hero that can provide 5 saps at once, which is the max stack of saps that you can use. When the Obelisk first came out, there was a bunch of KR players that was really abusing her power, just bursting with her like every turn and just watching the sap ticks away the boss, especially once you get skill investment into her and just looking at the saps just tick away, tick away. It's just real strong. And then next to her will probably be the Dark Nine, who also provides sap on S1 and S2. Pairing those two together can give you a lot of sap damage, which will be able to burst down bosses relatively fast. Then we have the red Chrome, and he is pretty primarily for those pesky stages where they heal, where healing is a problem and you just need a certain amount of damage to get through. Of course, sap can go through all of that if you have your team set up properly. Keep in mind that you do need a lot of debuff rate for it, but with the red Chrome, he's just in the same because he's the only hero so far in the game with the Wither debuff, and this is where he shine at the most outside of PvP, of course, where he can stop the enemy from healing. So, and it's on his S1, and he's a warrior, so possibility if he gets hit, he can do it when he has the counter set on. So that's a good thing. Then we got the light Zyra, who's currently in the rotation of paid heroes, who has a lot of crazy things in her kit that is just overpoweredly broken, stupidly busted. You can reduce the speed of the enemy, the action gauge that's on her S1. She can She does an AoE attack on S2, which she can give a defense buff for 2 turns, plus fills the action gauge. And you get a lot of action gauge. Like, even after skilling it up, you get 50% from her action gauge, which I think is what the highest in the game right now. Like, she gives you an insane action gauge boost on her X2. Then she can do a lot of crazy damage, like the crazy damage dealers of the S tier. So she got a lot going for her in her kit that can be beneficial, and she's a guardian, so possible bulwark set or Aegis sets if necessary. We have Green Walter, who's already been pretty good, which I will believe prior to the coming patch, where he was probably a solid S tier, but now he's broken tier because he is your free to play Arslan in terms of AoE attack buff for your team, but and that's also in his skill that is a AoE provoke. So he got like all his skills practically got buffed in some kind of ways. Be a lot helpful for your team. S1 giving you the death buff for not just him anymore, but the hero with the lowest health at that current time. Then we have Blue Astrid, who paired well with the Green Olivia and maybe some other turn bar reducers, can lock a boss from getting a turn. So you can passively just drop sap on them, lock them from getting a turn, and just keep cycling over and over as best as you can. And that just makes her really good in that aspect. Other than that, she doesn't really do much else. But yeah, she can stop turns from happening or stop as many turns as possible. So that's a good thing for her. Then we have the Blue Sophie, who is the only hero that has double AoE stuns, and she has one on her burst, which makes her a stellar option. So when you chain bursting, you can have her stun heroes at the same time while you're dishing out your damage or doing whatever that you're doing with your team comp. Then we have probably one of the best buffs ever for the Greenberg. Greenberg going from trash tier to instant best thing ever for Obelisk. And it's because of the change that he has on his S2 and his S1. It's like if he doesn't land his stun, he automatically activates his provoke, so he can insta provoke and lock a hero lock a hero pretty much every turn, especially on his S1. So you can have that up every single turn where the hero, if he doesn't land the stun, he automatically provokes. So I'm probably going to test it to see how well it is, but right now it just seems broken. Like he's probably going to be the best hero to have in Obelisk and making sure bosses do not take turns. So it might be one for everybody to pick up if we check it out and it actually proves to be true. Probably going to tell you guys to pick him up. But for now, don't worry about it too much. And last but not least, and the hero that we probably all want the most is the blue Yashua, which is a sniper that is a turn bar booster that is the best hero at doing that job because of how much burst gauge you gain from him doing it. It's insane. It's helpful. You can burst quite often and do some crazy chain bursting once you get him and get him maxed out. So this is the list right now. Just to let you guys know, I do keep copies of all my tier lists, and as we update them in the Discord under the tier list and guides section. So if you want a copy of any of the tier lists that I put out, you can always go there to get your copy of the tier list or any tier list for that matter, and just become a part of the community anyway, because so you can know when I update and make a new tier list, because we do change frequently. We usually try to update them at least once a month as we get new heroes, balance patches, and changes and things of that sort. So I hope this has been helpful for you guys in your Obelisk climb. I know we're at the end of this month, so maybe more of us can get through and past 30, at least get past 20, because I know a lot of us got stuck there for stupid reasons. And this is your host, Gamer Dude 2088, signing out. Make sure you like if you haven't liked the video, subscribe, turn those post notifications on so you can see my content when it goes live first. God bless you all. Deuces.